is Marcel Kintscher. I'm a sales engineering consultant, and I have been 8+ years in data and AI. And I'm helping I'm helping to link Calibo's platform engineering approach to tangible business value.
In this video, we are going to enter the world of data professionals. This video is going to be a Calibo demo specifically for data analytics engineers, and generally people who are responsible for building and governing data pipelines. As a data professional, many of the processes and technologies visible on the screen will be familiar to you. But generally speaking, what your responsibilities are is to get data from any scattered data source like databases, enterprise applications, file servers, and ingest it into some sort of data lake to build a single source of truth for data in your company. And your data lake, it might be Snowflake. From there, you are applying data quality checks to it, data transformation jobs to make data really available for the analytics applications, be it a business intelligence tool or a custom application that is built on top of it. In some cases, you also partner with data scientists to ingest or integrate some more advanced data analytics capabilities like machine learning models. Play Anna Appel, our analytics engineer at the Tasty Bytes organization. If we look at Anna Appel's day-to-day activities, that includes creating data pipelines and integrating data from various scattered data sources, doing data ops activities and data pipeline execution. Also, she's responsible for ensuring data security, compliance, and governance. And last but not least, if the company decides to switch to a different technology, she would also be heavily impacted because she would have to migrate the existing pipelines over to the new technology. We're going to see how Anna Appel would use Calibo to do her job more efficiently. And after that, we are going to compare it to the traditional way to make sure that we all understand the different way of doing the job with the Calibo revolutionary platform. Let's jump into Calibo, and we are logged in as Anna Appel. So, for example, if we now go to the configuration section, there are actually many things that we can do. Some are even grayed out, and we couldn't even edit users or the policy templates that we talked about earlier. So that is also not what Anna would be generally interested in, because her job is to build data pipelines. So let's jump into the portfolio created by Paul Porter previously, and then into our first product that we are supposed to actually deliver quite soon. And we are looking into the data exploration flow, because for this application or dashboard in the end, we first need to have our raw data ingested into Snowflake, which is Tasty Bytes' data warehouse of choice. And then from there, we do some transformation to it to make it available for analytics. So let's see how Anna would do that using the integrated development capabilities of Calibo. First off, this is the develop stage, and from here we could access the Data Pipeline Studio, which is where Anna would spend most of her time. Before we do that, let's take a quick look at what we see here. We can see that already there are quite a few technology added to this feature, and thankfully this was done by Igor, our infrastructure architect. Theoretically, Anna could also do this herself to self-provision her project, and she would do that by clicking the New Technologies button. And then she could select from all the technologies that Igor has made available to her through the policy template that was applied to this product. Now, since we already have all the integrations we need to go ahead and build our data pipeline, let's jump into the Data Pipeline Studio right away. This is typically the screen that you would see if you start from scratch. You could either start by importing a template, which saves you a lot of time after you have built a number of pipelines. But we are going to start from scratch here. The first thing that you would do is probably create something like a raw data source stage and define all the different data sources that you have. And you can really select from any type of data source that you could think of, be it an application or a database or file server. This is just a non-extensive list of options. And there's a really handy tool called Data Crawler. we've already set up one data crawler, which actually takes data from a MySQL database. And in there we get 7 tables: the country, franchise, location, menu, order detail, order header, and truck table. And you could theoretically unselect some of the fields if you didn't want to use them. Now we just take all of the data, and what we do is we feed it into a data ingestion catalog. And this catalog, we can then see the selected tables and fields from the crawler. And the catalog we can reutilize in our data pipeline studio. So we are adding a MySQL instance, and then we could either directly connect to the MySQL instance or choose the catalog that we created previously. The benefit of that is that you can do some pre-exploration of the data, and you can really choose which data to import. That becomes really handy in case your data files are really, really large and you don't need all of the tables. Then this catalog is a really handy tool. So you go in here and you again have the option to not select all of the tables, but we really want all of the tables, and we give this another name. We call it Tasty Bytes. Tasty Bytes raw data. Good. Now we have our first stage. Now we add a new stage. This is going to be an integration, because what we need to do in order to get this raw data into Snowflake is to first put it in some sort of cloud storage location, like for example in Amazon S3 bucket. And for that we first create a data integration job. And then we can define the pre-landing. So the pre-landing, as we said, is an Amazon S3 bucket. We call this pre-landing S3. And in here, thanks to Igor's work, we can already select any S3 bucket that we have. Theoretically, we could also go to that S3 bucket. We can browse data that is already hosted in this S3 bucket. Really handy. We don't have to leave Calibo to get these insights. And now the next step that we want to do is here to actually add a Databricks integration job. This Databricks integration job needs a source and a target node defined. So we just connect them via drag and drop, and then it allows us to create an integration job. Now a Databricks integration job is a really handy tool that you can use to migrate data from any source to any target. So you simply click through, this is our source. We've already selected the tables earlier. For the target, we just define a new path. We say overwrite, and this is going to be our final file path in the S3 bucket. We are not interested in publishing any metadata. If we wanted to, we could do that. And then it's automatically selecting the right cluster from Databricks to run this job. Now here we are having our first pipeline built. Probably we should rename this. Call it raw data ingestion. Okay. All right, and we can publish this. And when we publish this, we could theoretically already run this pipeline, and then we would have ingested our raw data into the S3 bucket. From here, what we now want to do is to actually ingest that data into Snowflake. So let's add another data integration job. Let's call it Snowflake integration. And now in this case, we can just use the Snowflake bulk ingest job. And we call this Tasty Bytes Snowflake integration. Okay, this adds actually a new technology to the list of technologies that we have seen before, and that we can then reutilize in this pipeline wherever we want. And again, as we can see, this one needs a source and the target node linked to it. So we first create that next stage. We call that data, or we find it under data lake. We call that Snowflake pre-landing. Okay, because it's really just the raw data that we now ingest into Snowflake. So we add a Snowflake node to this, and in here we already, thanks to Igor's work, have a Snowflake database connection set up. We can select the database from here and the schema. This is landing data. And then in the next step, we could theoretically already preview what data is already in there, right? And so from here, let's call this Snowflake pre-landing. Good. And now we only need to connect these nodes again, and then we can also create the ingestion job for Snowflake. Now this is really, really handy. Let's go through this step by step. First, what we need to do is to select the file that we want to ingest. And now, for example, in this case, we want to create ingestion jobs for individual tables. That's how Snowflake table ingestion works. You have one target table, and you can either load one or multiple tables into it. So we have in our S3 bucket the menu tables. So we select menu because that's the first ingestion job that we want to do here. And then as a next step, we need to define the landing stage, which is creating an external stage object inside of Snowflake for us. Everything with a few clicks. So the schema is still the landing data, and then the table is the menu table. The format is Parquet, and then it's already creating the stage name and the stream for us automatically. As a next step, we define our target table. This one is still the landing data. And then we just select the menu table, and we can also define the operation type. Is it an append? Is it an override? Is it a merge? We can say append for now. And the last thing that we need to select is our storage integration. Now this is really the only thing that you still have to create inside of Snowflake, but that's a quick thing. It's very easy. And then you can already complete this step, and we are done. We just rename this, call this Snowflake integration. And then the last one, we call this Snowflake pre-landing. Or actually this is landing. I used the wrong word. Cool. All right. There we go. We have our first pipeline. Let's publish this. And now we fast forward in time, all right? So let's assume that the development team, specifically Anna, our analytics engineer, has already worked on the products quite a bit, quite heavily, and she has created a really complex data pipeline that she's already tested a few times. And we look into this and we see that there are many nodes configured. I would like to highlight the additional steps after the data lands in Snowflake. Here, Calibo has created some really handy features that natively integrate with Snowflake to allow you to do some very important data quality checks and actually also fix data automatically in your Snowflake database. So one feature that we have is the data analyzer. If we look at the data analyzer in more detail, then we can see that this one allows you to check on data completeness, right? So identifying null values where there shouldn't be any, these kind of things. Then we've also got our issue resolver, which allows you to actually do fixes to the data. So if we go one step next, we can see that there are many options here. One is to deduplicate the data. You will have to select the unique key column, which is used to identify duplicate data. You can handle missing data, like replacing null values with a 0, for example. You could replace other values, like existing values, with any replacement value if you wanted to. So all of these things are made available through the issue resolver feature and are done in your Snowflake database. This is not, no data is hosted in the Calibo platform here. And then the data gets fed into the unification lake. Say this is some kind of staging database inside of your Snowflake account. Now, if we have this pipeline up and running, then we can have a very quick view on what happened during the run using this nice details feature here. So we can click through any step of your data pipeline and see how many files or records got processed and how long it took. We can also view the logs from here if we wanted to. I would have to log into Databricks for this because this is a Databricks step. But there's also another way to check on audit logs in general. If we go back to the Data Pipeline Studio and click on the 3 ellipses there, Then we get the audit log function, which allows us to check any changes that happen to this data pipeline, as well as runs that were executed and so on. There are multiple other features that are really handy, like the scheduler. For example, you could just put your data pipeline on a schedule, like every hour or every 15 minutes. Another one is actually to set up notifications, which is also really handy in case you wanted some people in the data team to be notified in case the pipeline execution failed, for example. And the last really handy feature, which I referred to earlier, is that you can export this very, very large, actually very complex data pipeline. You could export this as a template and reuse it elsewhere to save a lot of time. The last step I'd like to highlight in here is the data ops part. And now I'm selecting a different project, actually, one that provides more insights, actually, because the data pipeline has run more often. And from here, I'm selecting everything from beginning of 2022, for example, until this year, October, until now. And now we can see that this pipeline has run quite a few times. We can see how many records got processed. We get also a very high-level overview about the number of failures we experienced, and also a trend chart on the failures and executions as well. So a lot of insights here actually to observe how your data pipelines are performing, and really to provide you with the tools needed to govern them from one single place. Now, one last thing I'd like to touch on, we mentioned earlier, migration of technology is a really important topic for many companies. So let's assume Tasty Bytes management has decided to cut on the budget. We don't hope they do, but maybe they decide to not be using Snowflake anymore because they find it too expensive for whatever reason. Now, in that particular case, you would find it quite easy with Calibo doing that in case you really would have to do it. So we go back to our example earlier with the data pipeline that we built. Now, for example, this is ingesting data into Snowflake, but if, for example, you couldn't use Snowflake and you would have to just, do the transformations on your data being hosted in S3, then you could easily go in here and add a few more additional steps. So, for example, you would add in here a Databricks job, like in an existing one, and then, add an S3 bucket here again. And this Databricks job, this doesn't have to be necessarily a data integration. This can be for example, data quality check. All right, so test. Now, we could use instead of using the Snowflake ones, we could use the Databricks ones and do the data analyzer check on this, for example. Okay, and so now we would just connect this one to this and this to this. And now we could do any steps that we did in Snowflake, we could just do using Databricks and leave the data in the S3 bucket quite easily. And we wouldn't have to do a lot of code copying and SQL copying and coding and rebuilding, but we just do it inside of Calibo, and Calibo takes care of all the underlying coding needed for this. Let's jump back to our slide here. So Anna Apple, Analytics Engineer. What we've seen with Calibo, speaking about creating pipelines and integrating scattered data sources, really with Calibo, let's talk about the traditional way first. So first of all, you would have to use probably various tools to ingest data from very different data sources. Some ELT tools do not provide out-of-the-box connectors to some of the applications you use, so you end up using many, many different tools. And that makes it that you spend a lot of time actually on integration of data rather than providing analytics to the business users. So with Calibo, as you could see, we could create a data pipeline in a few steps, and we can connect to any data source from one single place, not needing to employ many different ELT solutions. And also there are out-of-the-box cleansing and transforming tools that natively integrate with your cloud data warehouse like Snowflake, which also saves you a lot of time on actually creating these objects in Snowflake directly. Right? So for example, our Snowflake integration job was done with a few clicks instead of having to create the external stage, having to create the ingestion pipeline, the Snowpipe objects, and so on. The next step being the data ops and data pipeline execution part. Now on this, if we look at the traditional way, you typically don't have an overarching view on all your data pipelines being very spread across various different tools. And obviously, since you're using so many systems, pipeline promotion from development to test to production would also be quite inefficient. And you would waste a lot of time on repetitive work as well, because you don't have any options reusing templates across the different tools you use. Now in Calibo, having everything in one place is really easy to always keep the overview on all your end-to-end pipelines. With the analytics capabilities, you have a really good view into your data operations. Then the next step is you can easily promote end-to-end pipelines from one single place, and also you can reuse pipelines as templates, saving you a lot of time. Now, speaking of data security, compliance, and governance, theoretically, in the traditional way, you would probably waste a lot of time on assessing security and compliance gaps, because you would have to look into many different systems, actually evaluating potential gaps. Now, the next thing is also that you do not probably have to have the ability to govern all your data pipelines end to end. With Calibo, on the other side, you would have built-in quality, security, and compliance features that you could leverage, speaking of the analyzer, issue resolver, and so on. And you would automatically keep track of all your activities through the audit logging, which always keeps a track record of what changes have been made to the data pipeline, allowing you to easily assess if there are any security relevant gaps. Now the last step here is the technology migration. We spoke about this at the very end. Assuming that you would have to migrate from one technology to another. In the traditional way, this would have taken a lot of time because you would have to recreate a lot of the objects, rewrite a lot of the SQL. Now with Calibo, it's just a few clicks, you add a few more nodes and you switch the pipeline via drag and drop. And of course, you would have first your infrastructure architect connecting the technology to Calibo. In a nutshell, integrating any data source and building pipelines leveraging the underlying data stack, ensuring data quality, security, and governance with built-in tools, and managing data ops and pipeline execution, you can do all that in one single place with Calibo. And our customer experience has shown that there's a time-saving potential for you as an analytics engineer of 30%.